Well, working with limit and offset is fairly easy. I have created here a little bit more of a comprehensive problem that will use a lot of the things we've been learning. So this is going to be a little bit more difficult and it's going to require a lot of steps to get through this. So we're going to break this up into many steps. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about the problem. So here, the overarching goal is to find the difference between how much customers have paid and how much they have ordered. Then we want to do things like limit it to only Kansas, Colorado, and Utah, and only show customers with the 6th through the 15th largest differences. But these two things I will care about later on at the very end. They're quite easy to end. It's quite easy to add that at the end of the work. So let's first talk about how we calculate total orders and total payments. So payments are quite easy in a way. We already did that in the prior analysis. You just group by customer ID and sum up the payment amount. You got to do that negative thing, but that's about all it is. Then to calculate sales orders, we already kind of done this as far as like creating the line items, and then you aggregate based on customer order ID again. This is going to be a little bit different, but we'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, I just want to show you that we can't simply join the payment table with the sales order header table directly. Even though we have a customer ID here and we have a customer ID here, if we join them before we aggregate, then notice that each customer is going to have a lot of different payments, and they're also going to have a lot of different orders. Well, every single one of those payments will be associated with every single one of the orders made by that customer. So before we join these two, we need to aggregate together the payments for each customer, and we need to aggregate together the sales order or the orders for each customer. And then once we have unique rows for each customer with payments and orders, we can join those two result sets. And we're going to create two subqueries to accomplish this. So the first goal, what we're going to tackle is how to aggregate the orders together for each customer, and then we're going to aggregate together the payments in a separate query. There was some information here though. It was saying that not all customers pay for their own orders. They have the parent organization pay for them. So if we have customer ID 1 placing an order, but their parent organization is customer ID 100, then organization 100 is paying for it. So customer ID 100 will have the payment, but the order will belong to customer 1. So those two will not be joined up fairly. Customer ID 1 will have no payments at all, whereas customer ID 100 will have more payments than they have orders. They might actually have 0 orders because maybe they don't place any orders at all. They're just paying orders for their subsidiaries. Okay, so how do we determine who is actually paying for what order? Well, there is this default build to customer ID in the customers table. So when we aggregate together orders, instead of aggregating together them based on customer ID, we're going to aggregate them together based on the default build to customer ID. So now we can find out what is the order sum for customer 100. So an order that belongs to customer 1, it will have customer ID 1 in here. But by linking this up and then pulling in this one on that same row, so now we're going to have a row with customer ID 1 for order customer ID, and we're going to have default build to customer 100 for that same row. So now we can just simply aggregate based on default build to customer ID to find out how many orders are associated with that parent company. And now we can compare that to the payment amounts. All right, so let's go ahead and get started then. So let's start with getting the sales order header. So I know I'm going to pull information from sales order header. I'm going to end that comment line, and we're going to be selecting, and we're going to be summing. I know that already, but I know I need to get this default build to customer ID. So I'm going to be pulling that from the customers table, and I don't know what table that's going to be yet, but I'm going to say default build to customer ID. And then I know I need to sum the line item things. So I'm going to create some sort of sum here, and I'm going to save that as total orders. And I know I'm going to do my group by based on this default build to customer ID. So for each organization that actually pays for the orders, how much have been ordered? And by the way, if we go back to our ERD, if a company both orders and pays for their own orders, then the customer ID and the default build to customer ID will be identical. So we will have a customer ID, say we have customer ID 6 here and 6 here. Well, that means that one customer pays for their own orders. Okay, so I'm going to group by default build to customer ID, but I need to get this information from somewhere, and I also need to get this information I'm going to be summing. So what is it that I'm summing up to get the total orders? Well, that was the whole quantity times unit price times 1 plus tax rate divided by 100. And I'm getting the default build to customer ID from the customers table. I'm getting quantity, unit price, and all these things from the order details table. So sales order line table and from the customers table. And then I need to join these two tables on something. So I'm going to say B for this one. I'm going to say C for this. I'm going to say A for this. So I'm going to join these two based on the order ID. And I'm going to join the customer table based on the customer ID. And that's from the sales order header table to C, the customers table. And let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So here I'm getting for each customer ID that pays for different orders, I'm getting what is the total order associated with those customer IDs.